Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. I should have seen it coming. The small signs, the whispers of betrayal hiding in plain sight. But when you've spent 2 decades building a life with someone, you don't question their every move. You trust, and trust. That was my biggest mistake. Mark and I had been together for 20 years. We met when we were young, too young maybe. I was in college, full of dreams, while he was the ambitious type, the kind of man who made promises about the future that felt impossible not to believe. I gave him everything. My love, my time, my loyalty. I stood by him through every job promotion, every setback, every moment of doubt. Together we built a life. We bought our house, the house I poured my heart into. It wasn't just a house. It was our home. The backyard had the garden I had always dreamed of. The kitchen was filled with the scent of my late grandmother's recipes. The walls echoed with laughter, with memories of quiet mornings and late-night whispers. It was the place where I had imagined growing old. But in the end, it was the stage for my greatest humiliation. And Mark, he played his role perfectly. Started subtly. A missing bank statement. A call from the mortgage company that Mark brushed off as a clerical error. Then there were the longer nights at work. The sudden business trips. And the perfume. It was delicate, floral. A scent that didn't belong to me. At first I told myself I was being paranoid. That after 20 years he couldn't do this to me. But the truth doesn't care about what we want to believe. One night he came home late. Again. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loosened, his wedding ring missing. "Mark," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Where were you?" He barely spared me a glance. "Work ran late." "You don't smell like work," I said, folding my arms. That made him stop. For the first time in weeks he looked at me. And in that moment I saw it, the absence of guilt. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't worried. He was done. "Emma," he said with a sigh, rubbing the back of his neck like I was exhausting him. "I don't want to do this right now. But I did. I needed the truth. Are you cheating on me?" A small smirk played at the corner of his lips, as if he had been waiting for me to ask. "As a matter of fact," he said. "Yes." My stomach dropped. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them, like he wasn't confessing a mistake, but rather declaring his victory. "Her name is Vanessa," he continued, watching me. "And she makes me feel alive in a way you haven't in years." The cruelty in his voice sliced through me. But before I could react, he delivered the killing blow. "And since we're being honest," he said, "you need to pack your things." The world tilted. "What?" Mark exhaled like he was finally relieved to get it over with. "The house is mine now. I sold it." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "You what?" His smirk widened. "You remember those refinancing papers I had you sign last year? They weren't for refinancing." My mouth went dry. I tried to remember, to replay that moment, but all I could see was my own naivety. "Mark, you can't." "I already did." His voice was filled with satisfaction. "It's done, Emma. You need to leave. Tonight." I was frozen. This couldn't be real. I looked around the house, the home we built together. My home. My eyes darted to the staircase, where we had taken anniversary photos every year. The living room, where we had spent countless nights wrapped in each other's arms. The dining room, where we had hosted holidays, where laughter once lived. All of it. Tears burned at the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. He thought he had won. But Mark had forgotten one very, very important thing. I knew his darkest secret. I left with nothing but a suitcase and a storm of emotions I couldn't untangle. Betrayal. Rage. Shame. He had stolen from me. Lied to me. Cheated on me. And then discarded me like I was nothing. I crashed on a friend's couch that night, feeling like a stranger in my own life. The next morning I met with a lawyer, only to hear the words I feared most. "There's not much we can do, Emma. You signed the paperwork. Legally, he owns the house." The injustice of it burned deep. How could a man steal 20 years of my life and walk away unscathed? He had left me homeless, humiliated, and powerless. But here's the thing about women like me. We don't stay powerless. Because when you take everything from someone, you leave them with nothing to lose. And that makes them dangerous. I knew Mark better than anyone. I knew the things he kept hidden. The things that, if exposed, would ruin him. For years, I had ignored the signs. The unexplained cash withdrawals. The burner phone he kept locked away. The cryptic phone calls late at night. But now I was paying attention. And it didn't take me long to find it. His greatest weakness. His secret crime. Mark had been laundering money. Not just a little, a lot. And not for just anyone. He was in business with some very dangerous people. People who don't like being stolen from. People who would make sure he paid, one way or another. And now I held the evidence in my hands. The bank records. The offshore accounts. The texts confirming every illegal deal he had ever made. It was enough to bury him. But I wasn't going to hand it over to the authorities just yet. No, that would be too easy. Mark had stolen my home, my life, my dignity. I wanted him to suffer. And I had the perfect plan to make sure he did. Mark thought I was broken. That I would slink away, disappear, and leave him to enjoy his stolen kingdom. What he didn't realize was that I had nothing left to lose. And that made me dangerous. I spent days gathering my strength, waiting for my emotions to settle into something cold and sharp. Then I set my plan in motion. The first step was simple. I needed leverage. I spent hours poring over Mark's old records, tracing his financial movements. I wasn't a lawyer or an accountant, but I was something far more powerful. A woman with a grudge and time to kill. And what I found, it was better than I could have ever hoped for. Mark wasn't just laundering money. He was stealing from the very people he was laundering for. The bank records showed it clearly. Offshore accounts funneling money in and out, with small, precise sums missing from every transaction. It wasn't enough for anyone to notice at first, but over time, it added up to a fortune. And the people he had stolen from, they weren't exactly the forgiving type. A shiver of satisfaction ran through me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice. Mark was arrogant. He thought he had covered his tracks. But he also had a weakness. He underestimated me. So I used it against him. I created an anonymous email account and sent him a message. I know what you did. The offshore accounts. The missing money. Your business partners would love to hear about it. Want to talk before they do. I expected him to ignore it or maybe even panic. But instead he responded in minutes. Who is this? Smirk. Hook, line, and sinker. I spent the next few days stringing him along, pretending to be an unknown blackmailer. Every message I sent made him more desperate, more paranoid. He started pulling money from different accounts, moving it around like a rat trying to escape a flood. I wasn't just watching him squirm. I was making sure he buried himself. Because every desperate transaction he made, I tracked it. Every call he placed, I recorded it. Every lie he told to cover his tracks, I documented it. By the time I was done, I had enough evidence to destroy him. And I wasn't the only one watching. One evening, I went to a bar near Mark's new place. Not to drink, to deliver something. I slid a package across the counter to a man in a sharp suit. A man whose name I didn't know, but whose reputation was enough to make even powerful men like Mark sweat. Inside the package, bank records, count numbers, a single note. Your money is missing. You know who took it. The man looked at the papers, then at me. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. I don't know who you are, he said. But I like you. I sipped my drink. I just wanted to make sure the right people got the information. He chuckled, tucking the papers away. Don't worry. We'll take care of it. And just like that, the wheels of Mark's downfall were set in motion. I didn't have to wait long. The first sign that things were unraveling for Mark came when his fiancée, the woman he betrayed me for, called me. I let the phone ring twice before answering. Vanessa, I said sweetly. To what do I owe the pleasure? There was a pause, then a shaky breath. Emma, I think something's wrong with Mark. I leaned back, savoring this moment. Wrong? Whatever do you mean? He's paranoid. He won't sleep. He keeps saying people are watching him. I found him in his office at 3 a.m. going through bank statements. He's acting scared. But maybe he has a guilty conscience, I said lightly. After all, he did steal a house from his wife. Her breath hitched. I didn't know. Didn't you? I asked, my voice turning cold. Or did you just not care? Silence. I let her sit in her shame before delivering the final blow. If I were you, Vanessa, I'd leave. Because whatever's coming for Mark, you don't want to be caught in the middle of it. And then I hung up. Mark was hosting another party. A grand event to show off his wealth, his power, his new life. What he didn't realize was that it was also going to be his undoing. I made sure I was there. Not as a guest, but as a spectator. I watched from the shadows as he laughed, as he toasted to his own success, as he paraded around like a king. But then the doors opened, and the men I had tipped off. They walked in. The laughter died instantly. Conversations stopped. Mark froze, his face draining of color as he recognized them. I couldn't hear what they whispered to him, but I didn't need to. I saw the fear in his eyes. I saw the way his hands trembled. I saw the moment he realized his world was crumbling. He tried to play it cool, tried to act like he had everything under control. But then one of the men clapped a hand on his shoulder and squeezed. And Mark flinched. For the first time his guest saw it. The cracks in his armor. The weakness. The whispers started. The speculation. The doubt. And in that moment I knew. Mark's reputation, his image, his entire empire, was crumbling before his eyes. I slipped out before the real fireworks started. Because the best part. This wasn't even the grand finale. Not yet. I didn't need to see what happened after I left Mark's party. Already knew. His so-called business partners weren't the type to issue second warnings. By the next morning, rumors were spreading. Mark was in trouble. Serious trouble. Word traveled fast in his world. Deals started slipping through his fingers. Clients suddenly wanted nothing to do with him. Investors pulled out. And the house, the home he stole from me, it was the first thing he tried to put up for sale. But no one would touch it. His accounts were frozen. His debts were stacking up. And his fiancée, Vanessa, was gone. She must have finally realized that standing beside Mark was the same as standing on quicksand. By the time I saw him again, he looked nothing like the confident, untouchable man who had thrown me out of my own home. He looked haunted, like a man who had finally come to terms with his own downfall. I didn't have to seek Mark out. He came to me. It was late, just past midnight, when I heard the knock on my apartment door. I opened it, already knowing who would be there. Mark stood on the other side, his face pale, his eyes hollow. He was a wreck. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Emma," he croaked. "I need to talk to you." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "About what?" He swallowed hard. He hesitated. "I made a mistake." I raised an eyebrow. "Which one?" "The affair. The fraud. The part where you stole my house." His jaw clenched. "I didn't have a choice." I laughed. An actual genuine laugh. "Oh, Mark, you always had a choice. You just chose wrong." For the first time in his life he looked small. He exhaled shakily. "You have to help me, Emma." Now that was interesting. "Help you?" I repeated, tilting my head. "Why on earth would I do that?" "Because you're the only one who can." He ran a hand down his face. "I know you set me up." I didn't say anything. I just let him stew in it. He continued, desperate now. "Please, Emma. I need money. Place to stay. I just need to figure things out." I held up a hand. Let me get this straight. You betrayed me, stole from me, threw me out of my home, and now you want my help." He swallowed hard. "I was wrong." Smirk. "Oh, Mark, you're not sorry." I leaned in slightly, just enough to watch the hope flicker in his eyes. "You're just desperate." I stepped back, my voice turning cold. "And I don't help desperate men." I started to close the door. But before I did, I left him with one last thing. "You should leave town, Mark." His brows furrowed. "Why?" I met his gaze, letting the weight of my words settle in. "Because they're coming for you." His face drained of color. "Who?" I just smiled and shut the door. I don't know exactly what happened to Mark after that. I heard bits and pieces. How he tried to run, but his accounts were locked. How the people he owed finally caught up to him. How he disappeared. Some say he skipped town. Others say he wasn't allowed to. But the truth, I didn't care. 'Cause I had won. And the best part, had my house back. When Mark's financial empire collapsed, his assets, including the house, were put up for sale. And thanks to a well-placed anonymous bidder, bought it. For pennies. The day I walked through the front door, I felt everything I had lost come rushing back to me. But I wasn't the same woman who left this house with nothing but a suitcase. Oh, I was stronger now. Martyr. Unbreakable. Mark thought he could destroy me. But in the end, he only made me more powerful. And that was the greatest revenge of all. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.